Sarah Jenkins and I, Robert Miller, got married right after graduating college. Our 3-year courtship culminated in marriage, even though, while we both graduated the same year, I was 3 years Sarah's senior, having spent 2 years in the Peace Corps before starting my studies. Both families celebrated our union, but my mother-in-law, Patricia, was perhaps the most ecstatic. She was especially thrilled to experience our engagement, wedding planning, and the wedding itself vicariously, experiences she had never had. Patricia had become a teenage mother and faced immense hardship as a single parent, largely because her devoutly religious parents essentially ostracized her. A few years later, at 21, she married a significantly older man for financial stability to provide for Sarah. Patricia never knew romance, a proper engagement, or even a grand wedding, as her husband, Michael Davis, had been married before and preferred a simple affair. Michael was a good man and provided well for Patricia and Sarah, but he was as unexciting as could be and about as romantic as a brick. I always felt close to Patricia, being only 11 years older. I never viewed her as a typical mother-in-law but more like a youthful aunt. She's as beautiful as Sarah, though a bit shorter by 3 inches, with hazel eyes instead of blue, and not quite as alluring. Patricia's lovely face often wore a radiant smile, and she was exceptionally kind. Despite her beauty, she was reserved and always dressed modestly, perhaps a result of her past. Several years into my marriage with Sarah, Michael passed away from a heart attack. While his death wasn't entirely unexpected given his lifestyle, Patricia was devastated. I managed Michael's estate for Patricia, offered her emotional support, and included her in our lives as much as possible. I wanted to keep her occupied with our affairs and her charity work. However, she adamantly refused to discuss or accept assistance with dating. I knew numerous men, some much younger, who would have been interested, but she showed no inclination. Shortly after my 6th wedding anniversary, I found myself in the unfortunately familiar situation of a husband betrayed by his wife. While I might have been trusting, I wasn't indecisive. Once I confirmed Sarah's infidelity, I moved out of our apartment and into an extended stay motel and immediately organized our finances. I believe Sarah genuinely loved me, but she lost her way and didn't perceive her brief affair with someone she claimed no emotional connection to as a serious matter. She accused me of overreacting. I knew Sarah had confided in Patricia, and while I never called her Mom, just Patricia, I was aware she was asked to support Sarah. 3 days after I moved out, Patricia visited me at the motel. I was surprised to see her, but given her kindness and my affection for her, I invited her in. We sat together on the sofa, and she took my hand. "I'm so sorry, Robert," she said gently. "I know I didn't raise Sarah that way." I squeezed her hand and replied, "I know, Patricia. You've always seemed like a moral person. Your own struggles have nothing to do with Sarah's actions. How are you holding up?" She had a tear in one eye as she answered, "I'm managing, but it's been tough." "I'm fine," I said. "It was a shock, but I'm decisive. I dealt with it and moved out. I'll probably be hurting for a while, but I'll get through it. Do you think there's any chance you could forgive Sarah and take her back? I don't know how to handle this, especially since she thinks I'm overreacting and doesn't realize the extent of her offense." A tear formed in my eye. We talked for an hour, not only about Sarah but also other things. When she stood up to leave, she hugged me longer than seemed appropriate, considering she was still my mother-in-law. As she pulled away, she looked me in the eye and said seriously, "I hope that your divorce from Sarah doesn't mean you're divorcing me too." "Patricia, there will always be a place in my heart for you," I replied. I felt better after Patricia left. By supporting her daughter's interests, she validated my feelings, didn't pressure me, and acted like a true friend rather than just a mother-in-law. I felt better until that night when I woke up sweating from a very inappropriate dream. I filed for divorce due to irreconcilable differences a week after moving out and told my landlord I was no longer responsible for the rent. Sarah was very upset. I couldn't understand why she was so distressed. What did she expect? She had known me for 9 years, and I had never misrepresented myself. Sarah and her lawyer tried various tactics, including counseling, which made the first 3 months difficult. I was in shock but stuck to my principles. I probably would have struggled more if not for the support from 2 of my single male friends who encouraged me. Patricia also called me every week, not only to check on me but also to share inspiring stories from her charity work. We met for lunch once a month, and during those outings, Patricia was always upbeat. After about 3 months of these lunches, we had a preliminary hearing before the magistrate on a Monday at 1 p.m. Sarah requested counseling, but my lawyer successfully challenged this by presenting photos of Sarah having lunch with Greg, her affair partner, at least twice since the divorce was filed. Even though Sarah tearfully insisted that there had been no sexual contact with him since I moved out, the judge wasn't swayed by her lack of distance from him and denied her request for involuntary counseling. It was clear to everyone at the hearing that this was likely the beginning of the end for our marriage, which seemed set to conclude within the next 3 months. On Tuesday, Patricia called me at work, which was unusual but always welcome. After the usual small talk, she got to the point. "Robert, you probably know that Sarah called me yesterday, really upset. It looks like the divorce will go through in a few months. Do you think that's the case?" "Yes, Patricia," I replied. "It's true. I'm deeply saddened, but I have to move forward. My lawyer thinks we can sort out all the financial matters, so a final decision should be expected in about 3 months. I figured you might be feeling down, so I'd like to invite you to dinner on Friday. It wouldn't be too awkward for you to go out with your soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, would it? If you're uncomfortable, I can always wear a disguise," she said with a hint of humor. I managed to laugh at this. "No, that sounds nice, and you don't need to wear a disguise. I just worry I might not be the best company." "Don't worry, I'll make sure you enjoy yourself and eat well. I know cooking isn't your strong suit, so what time should I pick you up on Friday?" I chuckled, thinking that her comment about my cooking was actually a compliment. "I can either meet you at the restaurant, or you can pick me up." "No way, I'm treating you. No arguments. I'll pick you up. Let's say around 7 p.m. "All right, I agree." On Tuesday night, I had another disturbing dream. If these kept up, I might need to see a psychiatrist. To my shock, though not surprise, when Patricia arrived at my apartment door at 7:02 p.m. on Friday, she was dressed far more stylishly than usual. She wore a chic, low-cut blouse, a short skirt, freeing heels, light makeup that accentuated her striking hazel eyes, and a new hairstyle that made her already pretty face even more attractive. She looked more like she was in her 30s than 43. Patricia seemed nervous as she looked at me. "Wow, you look amazing," I said, trying to get my jaw to function again. "Thank you," she said, visibly relieved. "The restaurant is quite upscale, and I didn't want to look out of place." "Is this a new outfit?" "Yes, I bought this and a few other things this week. I thought it was time to update my wardrobe." Patricia chose a restaurant that, as it turned out, had a dance floor. Unfortunately, while she was driving, her skirt rode up to her thigh, revealing more than I'd ever seen before. I couldn't help but think, look slim. The dinner was delightful, and Patricia's vibrant mood was infectious, making me almost forget the ongoing divorce. However, her drinking habits were unusual. Normally, she'd have just a glass of wine, but tonight, she ordered a bottle for us both. Since I rarely drink and only had 1 glass, she polished off the rest. After dinner, she convinced me to hit the dance floor. The only times I had danced with her before were at Sarah's wedding and reception and once or twice after Michael's death. Back then, she had turned down many dance offers. She was a simple, reserved dancer then, but tonight, she was full of energy. After several dances, we took a break while she went to the ladies' room. I sat at a table. When she returned, I asked, "How did you get so good at dancing?" "I consider myself a decent dancer." "But you were clearly better." "I've been taking dance lessons once a week for nearly a year," she smiled. "Did I do all right?" "You were one of the best dancers there, and you certainly caught the attention of a lot of guys," I grinned. "Oh, I didn't notice that," she blushed. Just then, a guy approached and asked if he could dance with Patricia. I was momentarily startled, realizing that with her appearance, people might mistake her for my date. Once I composed myself, I said, "It depends on my mother-in-law." He looked embarrassed, and Patricia playfully swatted my hand, smiling. "He's joking, but since this is only our second date, I don't want to disappoint him," especially if some young woman steals him away. So thank you for the invite, but I'll pass. However, if he leaves me, I'm sure I'll see you here again." She laughed and placed her hand on mine. The guy smiled, kissed her hand, and left. "You're quite the charmer," I told her. At that moment, the waiter brought over what looked like a Bloody Mary for Patricia and a soda for me. I was about to tell her we hadn't ordered anything, but she cut me off. "I ordered it on the way back. Now have a drink, and then let's hit the dance floor again." I'd never seen her drink hard liquor before, but she downed the Bloody Mary quickly. I finished my soda, and we headed back to dance. After another 5 or 6 dances, Patricia leaned in close and said, "I think I've hit my limit, both with the alcohol and the dancing. Can you take me home? I shouldn't drive. Maybe I'm drunk, I'm not sure since I've never been drunk before, but I don't think I'll be able to drive without hitting something." I picked up the car from the valet while Patricia made another trip to the powder room. Then I drove her to her house. She lived in a quaint, stylish home in a nearby trendy suburb, about 8 miles from my apartment. I can just take a taxi home, I thought. Patricia chatted non-stop in the car, repeating how she hoped I had a good time and how she hoped I'd forget about her cheating daughter for a bit. When we reached her place, she struggled with her garage keys. I took them from her, opened the door, and helped her inside. Once inside, she closed the garage door and slid the deadbolt shut with determination. She then pulled something out of her purse and handed it to me. "I took these off in the bathroom as a souvenir for you," she giggled. They were her panties. I'm sure I turned beet red, but that was nothing compared to what happened next. After handing me her panties, I stood there dumbfounded as she suddenly dropped her skirt. When I asked, "What are you talking about?" she ripped off her blouse, unbuttoning it, and revealed her bra underneath. I was probably bright red by now. I'd always imagined that beneath her old-fashioned clothes was a stunning body, but what I saw was even more incredible. She had a physique that could make any woman envious. Patricia approached me, planting short kisses on my shoulders, neck, and cheeks, mumbling something I don't think I caught all the words she was saying. "I've been sexually frustrated for decades, and I need you to do something about it," she murmured. The moment Patricia's hands found the bulge in my pants, I lost my composure as I carried her into the bedroom. My first thought was that I would definitely regret this in the morning. I was both physically and emotionally drained. There was no way I could leave, especially with her pleading, "Please stay the night, Robert. I've never woken up with someone I love before." Love? What the hell? I thought, putting that statement aside for later as she rested her head on my shoulder. I fell into a deep sleep almost immediately. I remember having several erotic dreams that night. I usually don't recall my dreams, but this time I remembered them vividly. The next morning, each one involved me making love to Patricia. My last dream turned out to be real. In the morning, I felt activity below the belt and realized it wasn't just a dream. "Thank you for the best night and morning of my life," Patricia said. Her mesmerizing hazel eyes locked on mine like a laser. We had a pleasant conversation, though it was more pleasant because I hadn't yet fully explored the implications of our encounter. I knew, however, that it would eventually weigh heavily on me. She smiled and suggested, "Let's take a shower together," followed by a quick kiss. "Sounds tempting," I replied, but just as I was about to get out of bed, she grabbed me, tears in her eyes, and said, "I'm sorry, I told you I love you." Since it was our first time together, I got the sense that this was her first time sharing a shower with a man, and she was thrilled. Patricia, wearing only a short robe, was preparing breakfast, singing to herself with a bright smile. We had a lovely breakfast, and she looked so charming and happy. Aside from my wedding to Sarah, it was the happiest I'd ever felt. After breakfast, I insisted she get dressed while I washed the dishes. She changed into denim shorts, a nice blouse, and casual flats, and I was again struck by how youthful she looked and how wide her hips were. She drove me to my apartment, and once we arrived, she asked, "Maybe you could show me your apartment? I've never seen it." "Of course," I said. She seemed a bit anxious, but it was hard to tell. When we reached the bedroom, which didn't take long since my apartment wasn't very big, she sighed heavily and placed her hands on my chest. "Robert, would you please have sex with me in your bed?" she asked softly, her hands moving down my chest. The mix of her vulnerability, her sweetness, and the amazing sex we just had transformed me into a man driven by desire. Luckily, I managed to undress her without tearing her clothes, though my shirt buttons and boxers didn't fare as well. Patricia moaned, gasped, and muttered as I stumbled back to bed, holding her close. We lay there side by side, smiles on our faces. "Did you enjoy it?" she asked. "Yes, of course," I said, "but I'm not sure I can handle this on a regular basis. I'm utterly exhausted, and my spine feels like jelly." She laughed. I massaged her back, and she did the same for me. We must have been in bed for about an hour when she asked, "Am I interfering with your plans for the day?" I replied, "I guess my plans changed after last night. How about we go to the cinema tonight?" Her smile was as bright as a Christmas tree. "Actually, why don't you come over for dinner, and we can watch a movie on my big screen TV," she suggested. "Sounds appealing," I chuckled. "When should I come?" "How about 5:30? You can help me chop vegetables. I cook a terrible roast." After Patricia left, I took a moment to reflect. What the hell am I doing? I asked myself. This is your damn mother-in-law. Think of the fallout if Sarah ever finds out. Besides, she might be falling for you. Do you really want to hurt her, even though she's the best woman you've ever met? Thinking about what Patricia had said earlier made me bury my face in my hands and mutter, "Oh, and you dream about her." My thoughts were a chaotic mess for the next half hour. Finally, I decided to just go with the flow for the weekend and figure things out later. The internal debate in my head eventually settled down. Taking things as they came made for an unexpectedly great weekend. We had a blast cooking dinner together on Saturday night. We watched half of a movie before moving to the couch in her office for some intimate moments. We even ended up making love in her bed on Saturday night. We hit the health club she frequented for a workout session on Sunday morning. Later, we went hiking in the nearby wilderness. Before leaving, we made love in the woods, in the back seat of my car, without a care about how sweaty we were. We had enough energy to enjoy another round of lovemaking in her bed on Sunday evening. By Monday morning, I felt more at peace than I ever had before. However, this calm was shattered shortly after breakfast when Patricia asked if we could talk before I headed to work. "Robert, could you please listen to what I have to say before you respond or ask questions?" she said timidly. "This is really hard for me, and I want to get through it without interruptions." "Okay," I replied, smiling and squeezing her hands. After a long sigh, she launched into a monologue that lasted 15 minutes, barely pausing to breathe. Despite her tension, she spoke clearly and without stumbling. Her opening words were, "I loved you from the very first meeting. You are the only man I have ever truly loved." She then explained that a long-term relationship between us was impractical due to her being 11 years older, the damage it would cause her relationship with Sarah, her inability to give me the children I wanted, and her awareness that I might never love her the way she loved me. Despite this, she concluded, "I will accept whatever you can give me. I will always be here for you." I was stunned into silence as she spoke. When she finished, she said, "Go to work. I'm sorry for taking up so much of your time." I kissed her deeply, then looked into her captivating eyes and said, "I have a lot to think about. Please don't be upset if we don't see each other for a couple of weeks. Although I usually make decisions quickly, this weekend has completely scrambled my thoughts, and I need some time to sort things out." She smiled, gave me a quick kiss on the lips, then playfully ushered me out the door. I wasn't exaggerating when I said my mind was in turmoil. Over the next 2 weeks, whenever I wasn't completely absorbed in work or other activities, my thoughts kept drifting back to Patricia, Sarah, sex, and anxiety. It didn't help that nearly every night I dreamed of Patricia, making love to her, traveling with her to exotic places, cuddling with her, and in one unsettling dream, having a dozen children together. I called Patricia every day, just to chat for a few minutes. She never pressured me or got serious during our conversations, except for a casual mention that her daughter Sarah had asked if she was seeing anyone because, "You look the happiest I've ever seen you, Mom." Patricia had simply remained silent. 2 weeks later, I invited Patricia over for dinner on Saturday night, and she eagerly accepted. Although I didn't have a specific plan, I was trying to gauge our compatibility outside of the bedroom. I ended up staying the night at her place and making love twice. I knew I was falling in love with her, but because of the 11-year age gap and the fact that she was still my mother-in-law, I couldn't muster my usual decisiveness. Our relationship did survive the final divorce after that. Patricia took Sarah on a week-long cruise. When Patricia returned, she said the cruise had helped Sarah significantly. Her anger towards me for ending things had faded almost completely, and Sarah seemed to understand that the fault lay with her own actions. "Did she ask about your love interest?" I inquired after a long pause. Patricia replied, "Yes." "So what did you say?" I prompted. Another lengthy pause followed. Patricia said that she told Sarah she was happy but wasn't sure if it would be a long-term relationship and had no plans to introduce me to her anytime soon. My indecisiveness might have dragged on for months, even years, if a truly life-altering event hadn't occurred. I had come to the realization that I loved Patricia, and we were together at least 3 evenings a week and talked on the phone every day. Despite my over 5-year marriage to Sarah, if I was honest with myself, my relationship with Patricia was far better. Yes, Patricia had been sexually inexperienced the first night we were together, but now she was not only experienced but also incredibly expressive, loving, adventurous, and energetic. The truly life-altering event came when Patricia called me at the office early Friday afternoon. We had plans that evening for a play and, of course, intimate time later. She was in tears, begging me to come to her house as soon as possible. I managed to get there a little after 3 p.m. When Patricia opened the door, it was clear she had been crying, and she immediately ran into my arms. I let her cry on my shoulder for a few minutes before carrying her to the living room couch. "Okay, tell me what's going on," I said, holding her hands. "I swear I didn't plan for this," she sobbed. "I didn't know this was possible. Please don't hate me. You can just leave if you want." I had no idea what she was talking about. I finally calmed her down, looked her straight in the eyes, and said, "Stop. Tell me what's on your mind. I have no clue what you're referring to." She sniffled, took a deep breath, and said, "I'm 7 weeks pregnant." This was completely unexpected news. We had discussed the possibility before, and she had expressed regret about not being able to have children, knowing how much I wanted them. Patricia had tried to have a child with Michael, but it didn't work out. A doctor had told her years ago, after she gave birth to Sarah, that for reasons she couldn't recall, she probably wouldn't be able to conceive again. My shock was evident, and I was silent for a moment. Patricia, thinking I was upset and might abandon her, cried so hard that I thought there might be a medical emergency. My mind suddenly cleared. I realized I loved her more deeply than I had ever loved anyone before, and I genuinely wanted at least one child. I didn't care about the age difference. It was time to make a decision, and the choice was clear. I cupped her face in my hands and wiped away her tears with my thumbs. "Stop crying, Patricia," I said. "I need to ask you something." After repeating this a dozen times, she finally stopped crying. I asked, "Will you make me the happiest person in the world and marry me?" It took her a moment to process my words, but after asking 2 more times, she finally understood. She smiled and exclaimed, "Yes." Her tears dried, and we embraced tightly. I expressed how much I loved her, and she told me she had been the happiest woman for the last 6 months and was even happier now. Suddenly, we heard the front door open. "Mom, are you here?" Sarah's voice echoed through the house. We froze like startled rabbits as we turned to see Sarah entering the living room. Her expression went from confusion to shock when she saw us. Sarah spoke first. "What are you doing here, Robert?" I couldn't answer immediately. Patricia then blurted out words I'm sure she hadn't intended for that moment. "I'm 7 weeks pregnant with Robert's baby, and we're getting married." A faint smile appeared on Sarah's face at first, seemingly thinking it was a joke, but when she saw the seriousness in my expression and our intimate embrace, her smile faded, and her eyes glazed over. I rushed to her and caught her before she collapsed. I carried her to the sofa that Patricia had just vacated. Patricia sprang into action. Patricia quickly fetched some smelling salts and a cold compress. Before she used them, she turned to me and said, I think it would be best if you left before she wakes up. With a hopeful smile, she added, can we go ring shopping tomorrow? Of course, I replied, kissing her deeply. I'll give my tickets to tonight's performance to a friend. With a hopeful smile she added, just call me and let me know what time I should pick you up tomorrow. We shared another kiss before I left. I gave my tickets to a friend and his wife, who were thrilled to get them, and I even offered to babysit their kids as a favor. However, we didn't go ring shopping on Saturday. Patricia called me around noon to let me know that Sarah would be staying the night and that it might take them the rest of the weekend to sort things out. I couldn't argue with that. I told Patricia I loved her and that we'd go shopping as soon as we could, hopefully on Monday. She chuckled before hanging up. Hopefully, it'll be Monday. I didn't know everything Patricia and Sarah discussed, but I knew Patricia loved Sarah as deeply as a mother can love her adult child. Despite Sarah's past mistakes with Greg, Patricia and Sarah had been a team for years before I came into their lives. Patricia assured me she had been completely honest with Sarah about her feelings for me and that she never had any romantic or sexual contact with me until she knew my marriage to Sarah was truly over. Patricia understood the awkwardness this situation created for Sarah, but she needed Sarah in her life just as much as ever. I have to give Sarah credit. Despite her own sadness, she was genuinely happy for her mother, who she knew had never experienced true love before. Sarah was also glad at the prospect of having a younger sibling. Although Sarah and I had no plans to maintain a close relationship, I made it clear that I bore her no ill will. I promised to always treat her with respect and assured her that I hadn't intended to hurt her. I just couldn't help falling in love with Patricia. One challenge we faced, if you can call it that, was Patricia's heightened libido due to pregnancy. She jokingly said she needed to make up for 2 decades without real sex, and who was I to object? We maintained a vigorous sex life until Patricia was 8 months and a week pregnant, at which point we had to pause until 2 months after our beautiful daughter, Emily, was born. Patricia and I got married in a simple ceremony 2 months before Emily's birth. We showed Sarah the utmost respect. She was a bridesmaid at our wedding. Although I had forgiven Sarah completely, my approach to Greg, her lover, was different. According to Patricia, Sarah had not been with Greg after our divorce proceedings began. I tracked Greg electronically, and with the help of a private investigator, I monitored him for a few days. When I discovered he was getting married, I sent his fiancée a complete dossier detailing his relationship with Sarah and how it had ruined our marriage. I was satisfied to see that Greg's fiancée left him within a week of receiving my letter, and he soon relocated to another city. After Emily was born, Patricia and I decided we wanted another child. We didn't consider another pregnancy for Patricia, so we opted for an egg retrieval. With Michael's financial support, we fertilized one of Patricia's eggs with my sperm and hired a surrogate mother. When Emily was 15 months old, the surrogate gave birth to our second child, a boy we named Ethan. Both children are now 5 and 6 years old, and my love for Patricia grows stronger every day. I never imagined a relationship could be so fulfilling or that we could maintain such a passionate and intense sexual connection. One more thing, Sarah married a man that Patricia and I both like, and she's expecting a baby girl next month. I've pondered what kind of relationship her daughter will have with our children, but I've given up trying to figure it out. All I know is that Patricia will love her granddaughter as much as she loves our children. Patricia seems to have an endless capacity to love.